my family. And it was a foreign concept for me when my dad didn't drink a cold drink, and it was foreign to me to see another man, maybe, a father of maybe one of my friends who drank a cold drink. I just didn't get it. My mum, also being the codependent, enabled his drinking by joining him drinking, and all of, being the victim by getting everyone to feel sorry for her. I remember blaming us children for her depression at some point. She could never ever take responsibility for anything, which brings me to my siblings. I took role as the caretaker of my siblings at a young age, around about 8 or 9 years old. I have 3 siblings, all younger than myself. I took we all about 18 months to 2 years apart from each other. And there's myself, a recovering addict and codependent, as well as my sister, who's a chronic codependent. I think she still is today, even though she feels she's all well. I have another sister who's an overachiever, a self-made millionairess, as well as an eating disordered. My brother is also a struggling drug addict as we speak. All of us, all being adult children of alcoholics, and I will maybe look at that a little later. We've all got our coping mechanisms that we use as recovering, children of alcoholics. It was only after I cleaned up from drug addiction that I realized I was codependent, always making everything okay, keeping the peace. I protected my siblings from screaming arguments at home, especially when my father came home drunk. It was then I would take my siblings for very, very long walks, so that they weren't, exposed to that commotion. I grew up on a script of children are seen and not heard. You can't be sad or angry. If you cry for no reason, you were threatened with, I'll give you something to cry about. I was 9 years old when I first noticed that when my dad's mood changed considerably for the better after he had his first drink in the evenings. So I decided to test it, and it was at that moment. It's a moment I'll never forget, because it just took away all my anxieties. It took away all my fears. It took away all my need to make everybody happy, and and I just knew that something worked for me. It made me feel so good, and so started the next 19 years of my life as a drug addict and alcoholic. But that's a story for another time. My relationship with my father broke down considerably after him going into rehab a few times and watching him relapse many times after that. The last treatment, we had a conjoint with his counselor and asked him to make a choice between, his children or carry on drinking. And he chose to carry on drinking. It was then that I stopped all contact with my father. And it was 2 years that I never spoke to him until I saw him about 2 weeks before he died. And it was a direct result of his alcoholisms. He had cirrhosis of the liver. His heart was not doing well. He was having seizures. He had dementia. And he was 65, 66 years old. His body couldn't carry his own weight. He had become a really, really sick man. So I knew I had to walk away from him then, because my recovery depended on it. Sorry, my voice is a bit croaky. I'm a little bit sick. So the same as my brother today, I've had to, put down the same boundary, because he's recently relapsed, and he's and I can't be around a person who's still using, so I do it for my own recovery. My mum and I were always very close until the day she died. She died of emphysema as a direct result of cigarette smoking. We seem to get better with me setting more boundaries with her, and letting her know exactly what I thought and felt. And I got very healthy around that. My codependency only came to the fore, well, I only realized I was a codependent, was when I started having long-term relationships, and I would, the dysfunction was so insane that I would only feel good if my partner felt good. I would feel sad if my partner was sad. I saw, I needed to make everything okay all the time, just so that this person wouldn't leave me. And that bred very, very, more active addiction for me, because I was always getting hurt. And every time I got, this person, my one relationship I was in, this person would always have affairs, and I'd always take this person back every single time, because they were coming back to me. It was okay, and that's I just increased more chemicals and more chemicals at that time, and I ended up with no self-worth, no self-esteem or anything like that. I only when I came into recovery did I find out what it really was about. It didn't mean that I was a bad person, or that nobody would love me or anything like that. And I did a lot of therapy after treatment, including interpersonal group therapy. I did gender group therapy. I went to Codependence Anonymous. I've done a hell of a lot of work surrounding that, and now that I'm working as a counselor of chemical dependency and stuff, it requires me to say no on a regular basis. And when I first had to say no to anybody, I felt so guilty, because it was such a foreign word to me as such. And but it keeps me on my toes and reminds me of how far I have come. No is the most loving word for any addict, in active addiction as well as in treatment. And I believe that that showing our addict is more about love in action. We need to show our addicts that we love them toughly. So that's basically my story as a coming from a dysfunctional family, learning stuff from scripts, because I grew up learning from my parents, and I thought that was the norm, because they're supposed to be the ones that are teaching me. And I'm not saying they didn't teach me good values and morals and all of that, but I sure as hell knew how to cross boundaries, and I knew how to not, see my own worth, or anything like that. So, I mean, most of my life, then I just turned to drug addiction. But just knowing I was an adult child of alcoholics the fact is I became very isolated. I never played with other children or had best friends or anything like that. I prefer to just hang around with dogs and cats, to be honest. They seem to, show a bit of like unconditional love, I suppose. I have a huge fear of authority figures, and I think I still do today, because I always want to do stuff perfectly, and I always want to I don't want to be criticized for anything. My life, when I went into treatment, I was the biggest victim you'll ever see. I mean, it was everybody else's fault but mine. I even remember one day having a lecture in that chemical dependency is a disease, and that it's a genetic disease. I phoned my father straight afterwards, and I said to him it was all his fault that I was in treatment, because he gave me this disease, So it was his fault. It was all the partners that I had's fault. It was never my fault. And in many levels, I got addicted to so much excitement in my life. I was always living on the edge. I was always pushing that envelope. I think I still do today. I was really terrified of my parents dying. I was really terrified that they wouldn't love me anymore. So, I mean, that's exactly what I became. But I've really worked hard for almost 20 years on codependency. It was very easy, to get sober. I mean, it was not so easy living sober, because you've got life that gets in the way. But to be able to live, boundarized and healthy within yourself, and knowing what you like and what you don't like, was the most difficult for me. And in my relationship now, I know that if anything happens in the relationship, I'm not going to fall apart. I'm going to survive. And whereas before I didn't think I would. I thought I was going to die, I was going to kill myself and all sorts of things, because nobody will ever love me like that person does. But today I know that I'm an individual, and I have got worth. So I just thought I'd share you a bit about, a family that it just bred addiction and codependency, and it's just rubbed off on every single one of us. And I'm in a good recovery at the moment. So if there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them. And I don't know if Cheryl or you, Kate, want to chip in a bit.
Thanks, Carmen. It's always very inspiring to hear somebody's raw share. And I think it's harder when we talk about our families. Sometimes it's easier to talk about ourselves. And I think you've brought light to quite a few issues that people might relate to. So from our side, just thank you. And I think it's important that we can open out and share on anything that Carmen has brought up, or any questions that you'd like to ask her. Please unmute yourself or raise your hand, and then we'll call you out to share.
Just a message from Sienna saying thank you for sharing your journey. It's very powerful.
Thank you, Sienna.
Carmen, if you were to comment on the thing that you've had to hold each day, what would it be? What is your one thing, if there is such a thing? What do you hold on to?
What do I hold on to? That I'm gonna be okay no matter what. That I don't need validation. That I can do that for myself. I hold on to a whole brand new set of morals and values that I live by on a daily basis. You know, I just know that I have the support that I never ever had before, and healthy support at that. But the one thing I do live by is that I'll be okay.
Thanks. I see Merle's raised a hand. I'm just going to unmute you, Merle.
Are you managing, Cheryl?
No, second time. Okay, Merle's unmuted herself.
Okay.
Carmen, congratulations. Hi, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Thank you for being so brave and sharing.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I can honestly say that I didn't realize I was a codependent until our son was admitted. You think you know about enabling and codependency. My father was an alcoholic, and it only really caught up with him in later years. They managed to get a job. Then stuff happens, you lose the house, you lose the boat, and all this stuff. I have a brother who had a problem, but we all thought it was because he was on the border. My late grandfather died of dementia from alcohol, I think. And so thank you, because I didn't realize how I don't have, okay, I smoke and I fix everybody's problems. So I suppose that's addiction. But I didn't realize our families, how we take everything from our families into our own little homes that we think are going to be perfect. And we put all that toxic stuff behind us until our children start with their behaviors. So thank you. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Merle.
Just a couple of questions. Thanks for sharing, Carmen. Please will you share your definition of codependency in a bit more detail, especially if it comes from a seemingly normal family?
Okay. I think I'm going to ask Cheryl to share the definition of codependency in a bit more detail. She's more the expert around that. I might get it a bit screwed tonight.
Okay, I think that's next week's chat, actually, if I'm not mistaken, Kate.
Yeah.
So that's the topic that we are going to cover in great depth next week, Tuesday. But in a nutshell, the best way I think I can describe it is when you're addicted to people, places, or things, and you're addicted to the addict and the chaos, and we measure our worth based on them, how happy they are, how functional they are. It's putting our needs aside and ensuring that their comfort is always present. It's about compromising ourselves, our values, our morals. It's other people's needs are more important than ours.
Yeah.
And next week we'll literally cover more than 40 minutes about it. But that's it in a nutshell for today.
Yeah. Irene, how do you maintain boundaries around your recovery without feeling disconnected from your family? I think there's my recovery comes first and foremost. If anybody is going to get in the way of that, I will distance myself from my family without feeling disconnected from them. Definitely not. I'm very close to both my sisters in different ways, and we hardly speak to each other. I mean, we might speak to each other once a month. That's how dysfunctional our family still is. But we speak to each other maybe once a month, maybe one other sister once every 2 months, because I can only take her in small doses. But with my brother, I choose to not engage at all with his dysfunction at the moment, because he's a sick person, and I will not let it get in the way of my recovery. So I'm not disconnected though. I will make sure that he's okay, but in no ways will I engage with him. Does it make sense?
Thanks, Carmen. I think
Okay.
What it brought up for me was the process of detaching. I think we have this belief that if we just set a boundary, it's a chasm, it's a big distance between us and our loved ones. But I think it's more about the amount of work we're willing to put in to detach without strong and harsh emotions. It's that deep realization of our own powerlessness, and then refusing for our lives to become unmanageable, where that somebody you love very dearly is self-destructing. And I think we have to have gone through a process of trying everything. And once we've come to that place of understanding, I've done everything and not made a single difference. If I step back now, then something might shift for them. And I don't dislike them. I don't love them any less. I don't hate them. I'm not judging them. I'm just putting some safe distance between us. It doesn't change the way we love them. It changes how we behave around them. And I think, when I read that question, I think what came to mind was we feel this like real pain when we think that we can't have access to our families, and particularly when their behavior is so self-destructive. But I think for many of us, when we've lived such hectic lives and such painful lives with addiction, that sometimes when we take that step back and we create some of that emotional distance, it's quite cathartic, because we know where we start and they end, and where they start and when we end. And it's possible, but I have to stress, it's a long, long process.
I mean, one thing that got me into...
Also asked, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, carry on.
No, carry on. You can carry on, please. I'll read that later.
Okay. All right. I think what pushed me over the edge in getting into treatment myself was my family then, in their very dysfunctional ways, just turned their backs on me. Each and every one of them. And I only got access, well, they were only ready to see me again after I'd been in recovery for at least 5 years. And so I had no relationship with my family at all until I was 5 years clean. So I can only imagine what kind of chaos I caused. For my whole family, including my dad, my mom, every one of them turned their back on me. Well, I say turned their back on me. I just don't think they could bear watching me die. So yeah. And maybe that's the journey I needed to go through to realize who I was, within that family unit.
I think it's also important, before we answer the next question, when you say that, Carmen, it's coming to terms with the fact that you can get better irrespective of what's happening in your family dynamics. And you could have used that as an excuse to relapse. You could have played the victim, but instead it was about personal responsibility. And I think that's the essence of recovery, both for the chemical dependent as well as the codependent. Is recovery is about taking personal responsibility, and without blaming, saying, this is the chaos I caused. I recognize my family is not well, but I don't judge them. I can get better in spite of this. And that for me is true recovery, where you can look at the family dysfunction and not blame anybody, but take ownership of, I got this mess, I have to fix up this mess, and I'm not going to wait for them to get better. They'll have to do that if they want to get better. And I never waited 5 years before I reconnected with my brother, but it was a minimum of 90 days sober outside. So it was the 90 days in treatment and then 90 days after treatment, because I also wasn't willing to disintegrate. And time is quite important in recovery circles, because time builds up some of that trust. And then there's another 2 questions, but if you don't mind, I'm going to start with the Sienna one first. What advice could you give to a parent in recovery with younger children for the patterns of codependency addiction not to repeat itself, and how to find the balance of not being too strict and building trust? Would you like to try that, Carmen? Or?
Okay, I will. Kids in pattern of codependency not repeat itself. I think the way you can help your younger kids around the pattern of codependency and addiction is to be more healthy yourself with healthier boundaries, and say when you set a boundary, you stick to that boundary quite firmly, because children thrive within boundaries because they feel safe. The balance around being strict and building trust, I think it's not really around being too strict or anything like that. I think the only way is you build trust by giving them choice. I think they can choose, whether they're going to have a consequence or not, and I think that builds trust, and building trust is also by, following through with, I've heard many parents saying, if you do that again, I will. And not 2 minutes later, the child will do it again, and they'll say, I promise you, if you do that again, I will. And it's more about, if you're going to say, if you do that again, this is what will happen, then you need to do this is what will happen, instead of, just talk, because they'll never take you seriously. So that's where I would say is where you could build trust. I think, with codependency and addiction, get well yourself and educate your children around this, and I think that would be the best way I would suggest.
Thanks. I'd like to
You're breaking up again.
Consistency. It's the one thing that's absent here. And now?
Better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing that we lack in addiction is consistency. So the addict is inconsistent, and very often the loved ones, families, and codependents are inconsistent. And if you want to raise healthy children, you need to have consistency in your word, your action, and the consequences that you're meting out. You know, you can't, I don't know, ground a child for 6 months because he snuck out the house, and then he steals your wallet, and then ground him for a week. Like, you need to have very clear, consistent consequences and boundaries. And also remember that children mimic what we do. So if we say to them, don't give somebody your lunch money on the playground, but they see us, you know, overcompensating and fixing everybody else's life, they're going to do exactly the same. When children grow up with control, and that's what codependency is actually about, they do one of two things. They either become controlling or they become a rebel to avoid the control. And that's, you know, where we start having a clash of wills, because often a codependent will raise a very strong-willed child who does not want to be controlled and wants to break that mold. So it's a long process, but it's about knowing yourself, being consistent in your word, action, and deed, and educate yourselves. Okay, I'd like to go to the one before that. Thank you for sharing, Carmen. Would you please share your definition of codependency in a bit more detail, especially if one comes from a seemingly normal family?
I think we've done that already.
Yeah, it's a different way that it's questioned, and I think the part I'd like to focus on is the seemingly normal family part.
Yes, yeah. What is normal?
Cycle on the washing machine.
Yeah, it is. A seemingly normal. I thought my family was seemingly normal. It was normal to me. So I would go with the same definition that Cheryl gave you earlier, you know, because I don't think any family is normal, but I could be quite biased. Cheryl?
I think it's also about the persona we're trying to create, and you know, the lack of transparency in the seemingly normal. I mean, are you seemingly normal from the outside, so you're putting on this bravado, which means that on a level there's a lack of transparency, lack of communication. And you know, sometimes that facade is incredibly, we have to overcompensate internally to maintain that facade on the external, which feeds into the codependency. So, you know, there's got to be a place where you stand up for who you are and the transparency around it. I mean, I think last week we discussed a lot around, you know, the disclosure of owning an addict in the family and owning the fact that you're codependent, etc. And I think that speaks a lot to the facade or the belief that we're the perfect Facebook family, or we're the perfect family, or the perfect normal family. And I don't think there is such a thing, but I think it's being transparent with where you're at.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You know, I come from a very facetious place with regards to this, is I don't believe normal exists in a family. There's a clinical definition of, if you want to see dysfunction, bring me a family member with more than one person in it. So, you know, normal is, I think, what we are familiar with and what we're comfortable with. But as you go through your own recovery, you start realizing that what was normal is actually quite unhealthy. You know, it was very normal for us to be controlled growing up. And today, it's one of my pet hates. And I have worked really hard at not controlling my own child. because I knew what that felt like to grow up being controlled. But at the time, it was the most normal thing that we knew. Okay. Thank you, Sid. Thank you very much for sharing with us, Carmen.
Okay, pleasure, Linky.
We have about 10 minutes left, I think. So you're welcome to speak about what came up for you in Carmen share, or if there's anything that we haven't covered pertaining to the family and addiction. Please feel free to raise your hand now and we'll let you speak.
Did you get the question, Cheryl? So there's a question from Lee. It says, Carmen, thanks for your story. A quick question. What are your thoughts on the value of halfway houses when going back to one's normal living situation will be fraught with risk?
I think there's huge value in halfway houses. I'm not sure what you're talking about with risk. Okay, reading it again.
So I think it's around returning to the normal living. Or
normal living, yeah.
When there's a risk involved, perhaps they're drinking at home, perhaps old dynamics, etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. I think, all right, the halfway houses I think are an amazing place to go because of the continuum of care. It's a place where you can, what I call, buy yourself more clean time, so you're much stronger in your recovery. I think the longer a person is in a halfway house, the more the stronger they become in their recovery. If they keep on with counseling as well as groups, and they're going to meetings on a regular basis, that normal living, maybe would become less of a risk, because I think there would be a lot of boundaries that would be put in place when living in a halfway house anyway. And hopefully those boundaries are kept in place by the addict. Say going back to a person who's in active alcoholism, it would be the risk would be too great for the addict. So they would need to think about. I'm straight down the line. I think the only way to get around that is to get the other person into recovery, or or there is no living together as such, because it's a very dangerous situation for any addict to go back into. I think they need to, I'm saying the recovering addict, I think they need to start making better decisions and, setting really big boundaries if they do want to go back.
I think it's quite difficult for us families to recognize that our homes are maybe not safe for our loved ones. And whether it's exposure to other substances like people drinking or chemicals around, but it's also, as families, we're not equipped to handle them emotionally. So we will definitely do something wrong. We either overcompensate, or the first thing we all do is become their policemen. So we watch every move they make. We put stringent measures in place and tight contracts. And a lot of families get really annoyed with us in treatment centers and halfway houses because, people say, but they can leave, or they have access to their phones, or, why aren't they locked up? And the reality of it is we can't protect them from chemicals for the rest of their lives. So our hope is that we build them up emotionally first, and we get them to a place where they no longer feel the need to use, because they've dealt with some of the stuff that they've needed to deal with before. But I know, from somebody who, when my brother first cleaned up and there was no halfway houses, we destroyed him, because we came from a very punitive place, and we were terrified. Whereas the last time we went into treatment, it was like, find yourself a halfway house and good luck. Bonus when you're 90 days clean. So I'm a big advocate for halfway houses, because I think the community does the work for the family, and it buys them that time that Carmen spoke about. And we do things exactly the opposite way from how the family would want to do it. But we support them, we don't control them. And we teach them how to become independent emotionally first, and then practically and financially. But it does take time. Okay. There was another question, also risks like availability of substances. So I'm assuming that the question is either around substances in our homes or substances in halfway houses. And when it comes to substances in halfway houses, it does happen from time to time. We've been quite fortunate. Lockdown has been a lovely thing for us at Changes, because touch wood, and I'm really touching it nice and hard, we haven't had a relapse, I think, in the last 4 or 5 months. Substances are available generally. So it's not, people don't use because drugs and alcohol is available. They use because they want to escape what they're feeling and go out and seek the chemicals. So I always, whenever I run a family support or a family conjoint, I do ask that if the loved one is coming home, to please keep a sober house for a substantial period of time, which means no alcohol in the home. Are not present, they're locked. So do you ask the families to please look at their own chemical behavior, if it's a dependency, if it's an addiction. Generally speaking, most families, when you say please keep a sober house, they're quite comfortable to do that. But every now and then we say, well, why should I change my life for my child? And then we ask them to please look, they might have a bit of an emotional dependency or chemical dependency on alcohol themselves. So that's one aspect of having a child coming home. But, recovery is about willing to make the necessary changes to have them visit or live back with us after treatment. Okay, our family will keep a sober house. However, my brother's partner is still a heavy drinker and is likely to go back there. I think that's quite a difficult one, because it'll make his life very difficult, or he'll drink. it's very,
Yeah.
very difficult. If anybody on the platform is sober and they know what they went through the first 6 months, just seeing alcohol, smelling alcohol, it triggers a lot for them. And they don't have the strength to say no. A lot of our clients will say, no, I don't want my family to stop drinking because I don't want them to suffer. And I say to them, nobody suffers being sober. You know, it's you live a good life not drinking. It's if you can't stay sober, then there's a problem. And you know, if he's going to go back to that partner, maybe that's the work that still needs to be done in his recovery. Will he still get counseling support regarding that decision? If he's in our treatment process, definitely. And even sometimes afterwards. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of addicts don't like to listen. So sometimes they go out and we call it do research and go find out if all the things we said is accurate. And within a week or two, sometimes they're calling us to say, please, can I move into a halfway house or move on to the farm because I'm not coping with life outside. And my suggestion is to families, please keep coming back to family support. Please learn as much as you can because this does not go away or get treated in a short 3-week period.
I mean, you need to look at how long it took for them to get into treatment, you know. It takes more than that to get well.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. We're going to close. If anybody would like to stay behind in the chat room afterwards to please ask us questions, please feel free. In closing, we've run out of time today. Changes Rehab, thanks you for joining us at this meeting, and we encourage that you please keep coming back. The opinions expressed here were strictly those of the person who gave them. Take what you liked and leave the rest. Our meetings may be confusing, but in time, you will begin to understand that recovery is a process, and nothing we do or say can bypass that. You may not like us or what we've had to say, but you may grow to love us the same way we can love you. None of us asked for this disease to present itself in our family, but since it is here, and even though we avoid blame, we endeavor to accept that we may have become part of the problem. It is our personal choice if we're to become part of the solution. Thanks to all who shared and thanks to all who listened. Please keep coming back. It works if we work it. Tough times don't last, tough people do. Shortly, we will lift the mute button so that we can all join in for the closing prayer, the Serenity Prayer. Changes Rehab, thanks you for joining us and looks forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday at 1800 South African time. Please feel free to join our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages to receive ongoing recovery messages. Before we close, I've noticed that some people are signing on using a name like iPhone or J, whatever. It's not that we don't respect anonymity, but we would like to keep this as personal as possible. And we do know that Zoom rooms can get hacked. So if it's at all possible, when you do sign in future, please use a first name. So that we at least can know if it's somebody that's part of the Changes family and support group or somebody that regularly does attend. Thank you. Okay, we're going to lift the...
Release Cheryl.
Cheryl's managed to mute herself and unmute everybody.
As she disappeared as well.
No, she's still there, but on mute.
I guess us. Is Kate, can you unmute everybody? Because I don't think I've got access now.
Okay, did you disappear for a while? Okay.
We are unmuted.
Okay. There you go. Everyone is unmuted. Okay.
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 The serenity prayer. God,
God, grant me
The serenity
the serenity
to accept
accept
things
things I
things I
cannot change,
change,
the
the courage
to change I can, and the wisdom.
to know the difference.
Okay, before we close, we do have one last question, which I think is important. Please talk briefly about who is allowed to join this group. I was invited by my mom only an hour before the session started, and I don't know if I'm even allowed to be in here. I'm the sister of one of your people in treatment. It is open to family members of changes and family members who have a loved one who is addicted. So you're welcome to invite your family and friends and therapists, and welcome to invite patients. We would just like to know some contact of a first name who's attached to changes, because some of us share some very personal things, and only if you are a family member can you actually relate. We just don't want people who are not to be joining, but it is open and you're welcome to advertise. We just ask that people use their first names when they join. Does that make sense, Kate?
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So
okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
We'll stick around for a bit if there are any questions that anybody does want to ask or anything after this.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Cheryl, are you?
I'm still here, Robin.
I liked your definition of normal. It's a cycle on the washing machine. Wow, that is fantastic. It's a normal wash. There is no normal.
That's the only place normal exists.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sue asked a question.
You're breaking up, Cheryl?
To that. His partner, the one who still drinks. Okay. Sorry, the signal is really bad here tonight. Any better?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah.
Kate?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Addicts are,
No.
yeah, addicts and alcoholics are welcome to attend. But am I going?
Yes, you up again?
Okay. We do open the meeting to anybody, addicts and those in recovery. But we ask that if people have drank in the last, I think it's 12 hours or 24 hours, that they don't speak. So they can listen with their microphone off and or their video off. So I is to help inform and give people accurate education and information. But if somebody's still drinking, they would find fault with a lot of the process. So it's usually for those that want to change. That's what this group is for. Hi, Vix. Long time no see.
Hey, Vix. Madam.
Her audio is off.
The audio is really bad tonight.
Was, hey.
I think all of us.
We've got a couple still left in the room.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's any last questions, please feel free. Otherwise, we're going to say goodnight to you all.
Thanks, Robin and Bill.
Okay, I think let's
Good night,
close.
guys.
Thank you, Kate.
We're only
Thanks,
here
team.
till time.
Thanks, Robin and Will.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
Irene. Bye, Tando. Bye, Vix.
Cheers.
Cheers, Vicky. I think she's sleeping.
Lucy.
Are you sleeping? Victoria? Are you sleeping? Let's see.
Gone.
Okay, there we go. There we go. She's getting big, hey?
Yeah,
GTO.
and she looks just like yours. She looks so much like Bagheera.
Does she? She's so floppy. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Be safe. See you soon.
Chill. Okay. Cheers,
Good
eh?
night. Bye.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thanks, okay. Thanks, Carmen.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Gats, where's the leaf? Okay.